Shabbat Shalom to all. And for those who are able to join us, we have a few pressing questions for our guest, who is really an expert in everything that is going on in Israel and how we can bring Israel to a place of greater democracy and strengthen it with our participation. Thank you so much, Orly, for giving us this time. You know, one of the things that's been on my mind is something that you had written in The Pluralist, where you cited the philosopher and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, who said, "If you know the why, you can find the how." And only recently, this past week, in an online publication called Feller, and probably elsewhere, we learned that when Hirsch Goldberg Poland was held in captivity, he shared that very same sentiment with another hostage, or Levi. He said, "He who has the why will find the how." Levi said those words gave him strength as the days wore on. And once he was released, he honored Hirsch by having that phrase tattooed on his arm, a reminder of all that he had to fight for and live for. So here comes the big wind-up to the question, right? With the current coalition government and its approach to the resumption of the war with Hamas, and taking into account the great schisms that are evident in our own American Jewish community, many American Jews are having trouble with the why. What would you say to them?
I think I would say that we all feel that the state of Israel is dear to us, at least the state of Israel that we strive for Israel to be. A state which is a light unto nations, which stands up to the values set in the Declaration of Independence, a state which is the homeland of all the Jewish people, and which treats all its citizens equally. And I think because we want this to happen, we must not give up, but rather lean in, because this is exactly the time when we need really all of us to come together in order to fight the problems that our government is posing, and to present our vision for an Israel that we believe in, and to raise a liberal, reformed Jewish voice calling to implement the values that we so dearly hold. So I think the why is actually very crystal clear to us, and we just need to remember that we should continue to fight for this, because unfortunately the other side, which does not believe in the same values, is very determined, and so should we. And in this fight, I think we really need our friends here. I think this connection has become stronger after October 7th, the sense of one people, the sense of peoplehood that is shared between Israelis and Jews outside of Israel. And we need you. We need you to help us in the struggle in order for us to have really the state of Israel that we have in our mind, and we so strive for it to happen.
In so many ways, it's like looking in the mirror, and we can derive strength from you and your example as things change around us here, to lean into our values and not to give up. And when there are so many who believe so fervently in change, we want to make sure that the changes are for democracy and for the right things. Israel has always had an open door policy for all Jews who wish to immigrate. So I have to ask, is it still true? And are there lessons that you can share about how Israel welcomes immigrants, which may be helpful to us as Americans as we grapple with our own policies? What does Israel get right that we should emulate?
Well, I have to say that we have a lot of problems with our immigration policy. First of all, despite the fact that Israel is supposed to be really the homeland of all Jews, the Ministry of Interior puts a lot of hurdles in front of Reform Jews, and especially Reform converts who want to emigrate to Israel and to really acquire citizenship according to the law of return, as a result of a very long legal struggle that we have led for 30 years. Our conversions have been recognized for the purpose of the law of return. So Reform converts, both in Israel and abroad and here, should be granted Israeli citizenship. But unfortunately, it is not that easy, and they face a lot of problems. And our Legal Aid Center for Olim, for new immigrants, assists hundreds of Olim and converts in their efforts to acquire status in Israel. So while we have it in theory, there is a lot of work to be done to make it happen in practice. I think in general, as I said, the immigration laws are not that easy in Israel. I can give you another example that our legal aid centers for Olim assist humanitarian heartbreaking cases, such as foreign women who marry Israeli men and are in the gradual process of acquiring citizenship through the marriage, but then leave their husbands because of domestic violence. And then the Ministry of Interior presents them with a cruel choice of either staying with their abusive husband and eventually get citizenship, or leave their husbands and be kicked out of the country. And this is the case even if they have been living years, for decades in Israel, and even if they have Israeli children who were born in Israel to an Israeli father and therefore are Israeli citizens. We have helped dozens of those women stay in Israel despite leaving their husbands. So there are a lot of problems with the Ministry of Interior that we really developed an expertise in how to deal with and help many, many people receive their rights and stay in Israel.
And I'll simply say personally in my own case and on the behalf of my colleagues, when we are working with a candidate for conversion or someone who has perhaps grown up in the United States or North America and seeks to go to Israel to make Aliyah, we always check with Iraq to make sure that their papers are in order, that they have the support they need, that their bona fides, who they are, their identity will not be called into question. And you are a tremendous partner with us and for us. It's just a great gift to, for people who earnestly seek to make Aliyah, for them to know there are two communities who are working to help them achieve their goal. I have another question, and certainly the changes or the proposed changes to the judiciary have been featured in at least New York newspapers. Could you say another word about it and how it affects the kinds of work that you do?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, when the government first set out to promote the judicial coup, they had a series of laws that they wanted to pass, the aim of which was really to restrict the power of the courts and give the government unrestricted power. Back then, 2 years ago, the unbelievable and unprecedented protests which we joined managed to stop the coup. But unfortunately, this has been resumed in recent weeks. And actually, this week, one of the most important and problematic laws was passed, a law which changes the composition of the committee nominating judges. Now, we have a very unique system in which a committee which is comprised of politicians and professional representatives, lawyers and justices, decide who is going to be nominated as judges in general and Supreme Court justices in particular. The current system demanded a balance, so actually those two kind of representatives had to agree on future nominations, and this brought about a balanced Supreme Court, some conservative judges, some liberal, but in general, professional judges. Now, what the new law sets out to do is to change this balance and give politicians a majority in the committee. And this is going to create a very politicized court, and it is going to be very problematic. Now, I know that here in the States, you have a very politicized court because obviously the judges are nominated by the politicians. But in Israel, we have a completely different legal system. Our democracy is very fragile. We don't even have a rigid constitution. And really, the only checks and balances on the power of the government are the courts. And if you take away the independence of the court, it has grave consequences on our democracy. Another thing the law states, which is unbelievable, is that if there is a deadlock and both parties cannot agree on an agreed nomination, each party can suggest 3 candidates for the court, and the other party has to pick one from the 3 they suggested. This is going to bring about, each side would bring very extreme candidates, and the other side would have to pick one. And again, it's going to create a very, very problematic court that is not going to protect our rights, but only think of the politicians and how the court is going to serve them. This is going to affect what we do tremendously, because we use the courts almost all the time, because as I said, when we face discrimination and we want to address minority rights and human rights, this is the place where we're going to go, because it's very hard to get discrimination addressed through the Knesset or through the government, because they are the ones discriminating in the first place. So if we go to the court and we don't have any redress in the courts, big problem.
So just to follow up on that, I didn't realize about the panel of 3, the 3 suggested individuals, and the requirement to choose one of them. That seems like it's stacking the court, in a sense. Do you anticipate, what we are seeing here right now, we see it in the universities, we see it in some institutions, certainly law firms, that DEI and other aspects of what had been part of a very democratic and agenda for, in regarding progress and equality, that these things are being rolled back. Do you think that something similar could happen in Israel as the judiciary changes?
Definitely. I think it could definitely happen. I did forget to mention one positive thing with the new law, which is that it's not taking effect immediately. Because the government knew that if it would have taken effect immediately, the court would have struck it down as unconstitutional. It's going to take effect only after the next Knesset is elected, which is at the end of 26. So that's a good thing, because if we have better results in the election, maybe we would be able to reverse it and to abolish this law. So that's, we hope it's going to stay the way it is and not change.
So it's the end of 26 because they passed the budget, and the coalition will stand as long as it's not challenged.
This week, when they approved the 2025 national budget, they really passed a major hurdle, after which it seems that Netanyahu has secured the coalition until the end of the term. The term ends in November of 26. It's rare for a government to, conclude its term, right? We usually have elections every 2 years, but for now it seems that none of the parties of the coalition has any interest to go to elections, because according to all polls, they're going to lose. So we have a huge majority of Israelis who, since October 7th, opposes the government, and this is a good news. We have a problematic government with a lot of power, but they do not enjoy the public support. According to a survey that was published tonight, on Israeli TV, 70% of Israelis think the government should go home, and they have no trust in the current government. That's a huge number, and we're also seeing a majority of people who voted for the government, 54%, are saying this government needs to have a ceasefire, needs to bring back the hostages, and have an investigation committee. So it's clear they don't have public support. And this is why they don't want to go to early elections, because, for them politically it doesn't make sense.
It's very important, and it's good to hear. This is perhaps conjecture, but also insight. The fact that people take to the streets every Motzei Shabbat, how does that affect the way the government responds to issues at hand?
So it's a good question, because I think a lot of people say, we're going to the streets at least once a week for more than 2 years, and still the government does whatever it wants. So it seems the government ignores that, but I don't think it's true. I think the government sets out to do many, many, many terrible things, and they didn't get all of them done, because they understand the public is not going to accept all of this. So they're trying now to do it piecemeal. I think it is important to go to the streets, because it's a nuisance, it's something that bothers the government, and the government needs to see that the people are not with them. Another thing is that the protests really strengthen our gatekeepers. They strengthen the Supreme Court, they strengthen the Attorney General, that the government has started a process to fire her. they show them that the people are with them, with the democracy and with our democratic institutions, and not with the government that does not want to abide by the law. And this in and of itself is very important. And the third thing is that during this very long struggle, we sometimes feel desperate and alone. And when we go out to the streets with tens of thousands of people around us, we understand we're not alone, and we understand the power of the people. We understand that we are the majority. It's true that they have the power, but we are the majority. And it gives us a lot of strength to go on and continue our struggle for democratic Israel.
That is so encouraging, and it's a lesson and a model for us, as we are trying to navigate the changes around us. Yeah, that's really, really important.
I think really the similarities between the two countries and the threats to both our democracies are striking. It seems that both Trump and Netanyahu are going according to the playbook of the autocrats. Yeah. There is a Princeton professor for international affairs called Kimberly Shepely, and she wrote about how autocrats use democracies to erode democracy from within. And she really lists 8 stages on how people take on democracy to take it apart. And Netanyahu is just doing exactly what she's saying. And unfortunately, Trump is following suit. So we're, making the parliament irrelevant, restricting the power of the courts, putting loyalists in key positions, usually people who are incompetent of actually taking care of the ministries, attacking the media, attacking academic institutions, and finally, the final stage is changing election laws to ensure future victory. One of the bills that our government is trying to promote, which thank God has not been approved yet, is a bill to allow them to disqualify the Arab parties. Once they disqualify the Arab parties, the whole of the political arena is going to change, and the right wing is going to ensure they're going to have a majority. And this is really the last stage. So this is why it's important to keep on protesting. And we're doing this in the streets, we're going to the Knesset, we're doing it all on all relevant platforms to not let this happen, and to remember that we have the power to do that.
I just want to thank you for sharing all this, because in so many ways, it's like a peek behind the curtain, because you're living it, you're in it, you are in the street, you're in the courts, and in so many ways, you're strengthening us with your knowledge. So what makes you hopeful?
Coming here actually makes me hopeful, because
having you here gives us hope. So that's
well, it goes both ways, because I really, first of all, feeling how much people care about Israel is really heartwarming, especially at this time. And we also understand that what we're doing is not only on behalf of Israelis, but it's really on behalf of liberal Jews worldwide. And this really is the wind in our sails. It helps us continue to do what we're doing, knowing how much people care about our work. The fact that Emanu-El is supporting us is really what allows us to continue. And I think this relationship between liberal Israelis and liberal Jews outside of Israel should really strengthen us both and allow us to continue to work for our liberal values. I think that going through this tough period, knowing that we're doing whatever we can to stand up for our values, is something that helps us go on in this really, really long fight. So I really want to thank you for, inviting me here. It gives me the power to go back to Israel and continue to do what we're doing.
We love to have you. We love to welcome you. And even when the news is not as positive as we hope, you're our dear friend, and we always have a place for you here. Thank you for sharing so much, and for giving us hope, and for giving us other models, and for encouraging us to continue our support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we will overcome this difficult moment together. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for staying. We appreciate it.